And this is also where you find out exactly what you forgot to disconnect. So, let's see. Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and consider subscribing. I put new videos every week, so there's always something new to watch here on the channel. Today's video, I'm going to try to remove the engine from that 1999 S-Type V8. The engine is completely toast. Probably has blown head gaskets on both sides, and also I think it has a rod knock. So I have a used engine that's going in. However, that means you have to remove the whole thing, and that is not really that as simple as an older car, and there's a lot of stuff on there. It's very tight, and I've yet to make up my mind if I'm removing it with the transmission or if I'm going to leave the transmission in place and just remove the engine. But let's get over there and have a look at it. First of all, here is the replacement engine that is going in it. It is a pretty low mileage one. It's from a scrapped X308, so it's also a 4-liter V8 with the twin sensor engine. Has a different intake and possibly a different sump. I'm not really sure about that, so we'll be swapping things over. But over here is what it looks like right now. I have done a little bit of work since the last time you saw this car. In the first video of removing things, which was months and months ago, I removed, things around the wipers and all that. So I'll put a link to that up above if you want to check that out. But ever since then, I haven't done too much except just a lot of trying to figure out what to do. I have a manual for a little bit of a later car and a Jaguar one manual, and they want you to remove the transmission first and then remove the engine. But I've talked to a few people who have removed the engine and transmission together. That seems to be possible. And in my opinion, it seems to be possible to leave the transmission in place as well. I've yet to decide what I'm going to do, so I guess we'll get to follow along. This won't be a completely how to do this because I've never done an engine's removal on an S-Type, so a lot of it is a learning curve for me. I might make a lot of mistakes. You guys might point them out in the comments down below, but I'm learning, I'm having fun, and I'm doing this for a friend, so hopefully it's going to turn out pretty well. So what I've done so far is, of course, the bonnet is off, all the other things. Coolant expansion tank, air intake, all the radiator hoses. The radiator fan is over there. That sits on the top hoses. Got some of the bottom hoses here. I got the heater valve over there. Heater circulation pump is out of the way. Otherwise, the radiators are still in place. I've checked, and the AC is probably leaked out because it's all empty. So I think I'm going to remove the radiators and with the AC condenser as well, just to get them out of the way so I don't hit anything on them. Then I have checked, some other people have said that they've removed all the ancillaries as well, so like the alternator, the AC compressor, and the power steering pump, just to get some more space around the engine. I may do that. I have not made up my mind yet. I will be removing the intake just because it is plastic and I only have one. I need to reuse that one, so gotta remove that. Remove all the wiring, of course. I may actually just remove the coils so I don't damage them. Got power steering reservoir over here. I think I'm gonna move that to the side, probably drain that. Probably remove the power steering pump. Like I said, a lot of things are unknown. But I think the next step will be to try and get the radiator out, and then just continue stripping the top of the engine, intake, all of that wiring out of the way. Once all of that is pretty much done and I can see that I don't need to remove any more stuff up top, I think we'll get the car up in the air, go underneath, have a look at the bell housing bolts for transmission, if they're very difficult to get onto or not, kind of see how big the transmission looks to be, and if there should be an issue getting it all out as one, or if it's easier leaving in place, because if I need to take transmission out, I will need to disconnect the coolant lines and all that for a transmission. So I don't know, we'll see what is easiest. Enough blabbing here, let me start removing some things. I decided to tackle the intake manifold first because it will feel like a good milestone with a big part of the engine removed. There are some bolts down here which seem to hold it in place, so I'm just removing those on both sides. I've removed the wiring on that side, and then I'm going to feel sort of what needs to be disconnected. I'm guessing the fuel line over here and a bit of the electrics, but I want to get everything loose and then see what I need to disconnect so I don't end up disconnecting more than I have to. I believe I've disconnected everything to get the intake off now. Disconnected all the wiring for the injectors. I believe, yep, all of them. Fuel lines disconnected. Undone all the bolts. Couple of vacuum lines disconnected and a lot of connections. So in theory, this should be able to lift up now. And I am stuck on something. Some PCV line over here. Let's see if I can get that off. Okay, that should be everything now. Alright, there is a line there. Alright, that went off. Perfect. Now the intake is off. With the intake out of the way, I'm going to remove the thermostat housing as well, just because I want the least amount of things in the way here when I hook up the cherry pickler to get this thing out of here. And that comes out of the way as well. This is something I will have a look at as well and talk to the owner. I recommend replacing this for the aluminum units since they're prone to cracking and leaking. But I'll talk to him about that. Anyways, it'd be a good idea to replace the O-ring anyway. Alright, now I gotta see what the next step will be. I've decided to tackle all the things under the car now, so I've jacked it up. It's on jack stands here in the front, and I've already crawled under once or went on my creeper, and it took some penetrating fluid with me and sprayed some of the bolts I need to get off. But basically, that is sort of my next step. Get things underneath. I'll show you all of that in a little bit. And then when all of that is loose, I'll put the car back down. And I have a couple of bell housing bolts up here. So I'll take out the other ones down there. And I think I'll try to get the ones up here loose from the top. Then I can set something to support the transmission and hopefully have it separated. And I'm going to have a look at the engine mounts. Maybe I can just loosen them up and have the engine sitting here for now. Or maybe I'll need to do some of that later. Not completely sure. Also going to have a look under there, see what lines and other things I may need to disconnect. Alright, let's roll under here and have a look. I already removed that cover there. It's right there on the ground. Just to see if that was the one to get to the torque converter. And it is. There's one on the other side as well. So that seems to be one of the torque converter bolts. There should be 3 of them. At least I think that's what they look like. I'll have a look at the other side as well. I'm not 100% sure about that, but we'll find out. I've also seen that the rear oxygen sensors are connected on transmission, just like they are in the V6 version of this car. So they can stay in place. The front ones are connected right there, so I'll have to disconnect those. I have sprayed penetrating fluid up on the exhaust bolts there. They don't look too bad at all, but I'll spray them once again and have them sit for a day or so just to make sure I can absolutely get them off. So I need to separate the exhausts there. Shouldn't be too bad. Have the power steering lines here, 2 of them. I think the easiest is to disconnect them right up here by the rack because it looks very tight up there. Also, the fittings up there do look a little bit more corroded than the ones back here. The car has had good underseal in the past. Everything is covered in this like sort of thin black layer. So that is really good. So I think a lot of things won't be too bad to get off. Up here we have the AC compressor, and I already checked before there is no gas in the system, so I will remove that bolt up there. Those 2 lines should come off, so just let those hang down. And I haven't made up my mind yet if I'm going to remove the compressor or not. It's probably just these 4 bolts here and a connection or so, so I may do that, may not, yet to decide. And then up there, you can see the engine mount. It's held in place with, looks like 4 bolts against the block, but I think it is just that nut right, I'm not sure if you can see it, right in there. I think that is where the bottom of the engine mount. So maybe I can remove those while I have the car swept up in the air like this, and the engine will just sit in place, you know, by gravity, and then lift it up later. At least that's what I hope. And over here, just roll over a second, got the alternator, and I can just see some cables up there. So I'll disconnect those, and not sure. I've yet to decide if I'll leave the alternator in place or not. I saw someone do this job and they removed all the ancillaries. Not sure if that will be necessary or not. It's quite tight at the bottom of the oil pan between here. So the engine will need to come a little bit up first before I start tilting it. So I think it's going to be quite tight to get it out. But my next job now I think will be to drain the oil, just so that is out of the way for now. It's just easier to do that than to do that later. So I'm going to put a cash pan down here, undo the drain bolt, let that drain. Before that, I will soak all those bolts again. I need to remove with some penetrating fluid. I'll let all this sit overnight, and then tomorrow I'll start removing some of these things. Don't think I'll be able to film all of it. It's quite tight on the creeper down here with the camera. But you saw it's just some basic unbolting of things. And then hopefully I can lower everything back on the ground again and get back on top. Let's see how bad this oil looks. Or if there's any water in as well, because I do think the head gaskets are blown on this engine. Alright, that's just oil. Does look very dark, and also no, can't see any water contamination at the moment. I decided to start to see if I could undo the torque converter bolts. There's supposed to be 3 of them. I've done 2 so far. This is the last one. They've been pretty tight, but I put a long breaker bar on them, and I finally managed to get them to break loose. So I thought, you know, if I can get those off, I know that I'll be able to hopefully separate the transmission. So I'll get this last one off here. Then I will undo the 2 bolts for the exhaust. Let that hang in place somehow with a bungee cord, I think, or maybe a jack stand. Then move on to the transmission bell housing bolts. I'll do all the bottom ones here. The ones up top I can do later. I have undone the pipes here for the AC. I'm going to try and leave this in place for now. It looks like it should fit, but if that's a problem, I'll do that later. And then it should just be a couple cables on the other side. It's been quite a challenge here with the exhaust. I mean, it hasn't been off since the car was made in 1999, so it's stuck on there quite a bit. You can see that bolt over there, the nut over there, or the bolt itself, snapped. Even if I had it drenched in penetrating fluid for about a week and tried heat as well, it just snapped off. But there's a lot of it sticking out, so I should be able to get that off with some heat and some vice grips and the bench. The one in there, I can't get a good grip on it, whatever I do. Even with long extensions and 3/8 extensions that are thinner, I can't get a good grip on it. It just wants to slip. So, yeah, not really know what I'm going to do with that one at the moment. So I decided to try and get the manifolds off instead. And I just have one more bolt left. All the other ones came off. One did snap, but doesn't matter. I haven't been super careful with them because I'm not reusing the heads for this engine at all, so it doesn't matter. But let me see, I have a bunch of extensions here. Thought I'd try and show you guys getting off the last bolt out of here. This project has been pretty much impossible to film. Everything is just very tight in here. So I'll get that off here, and with this drop down, either I'll try and get the whole thing off by disconnecting it at the rear and the other side, or with a drop down I'll have enough space to get some extensions off there and get that last nut off over there. One side is now completely loose, so I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, and then I hope there's not too many more obstacles. It's a little while later. There's only one thing left to do, hopefully, I think, before this thing can be lowered down on the ground, but I'll show you what I've done. I removed the AC compressor here just to get to the exhaust manifold bolts up there. So that is all loose. However, one of the catalytic nuts up there is just, I cannot get it. It just wants to slip off whatever I try. So I'm hoping that can sort of stay together when the engine lifts off, and then maybe I'll have to remove the exhaust, take it down, or I can get to it more easily with the engine out. So I'll leave that in place for now. But yeah, AC compressor's out of the way. Got the line over there. On this side, I have disconnected the wiring up here for the starter and a couple other things like that. Also disconnected wiring for the alternator up there, but I'm actually not completely sure if that's needed because there seems to be a short wire going to the starter. But yeah, that's disconnected as well. And I have disconnected the motor mounts up there, engine mounts, so they're just sitting in place. Hopefully I'll be able to lift those out, otherwise I'll have to remove them from the side of the block. Don't really want to do that. And yeah, the one thing left to disconnect is this line here, this power steering line from the rack. That goes to the power steering pump. So I want to just disconnect that here, and that will sort of travel with me up to the pump when I remove it. When I have the car down on the ground, I'll disconnect the lines going to the power steering reservoir and remove that so I don't break that since it's plastic. And hopefully that should be it. But you see how tight it is right here? So I'm hoping I can lift the engine up. Well, I need to lift the engine up to get it off of the engine mounts as well. Hopefully that is possible to get it up and move it forward. If not, then I'll have to lower it back down, come back down here, and remove those mounts. But this is all a little bit of an experiment. And all the bell housing bolts are out except 4 of them up top. But all the other ones have come out. So I'll lower the car down now and start disconnecting the rest of the things on top. I'll let that drain for a bit, and then we're ready to lower it back on the ground. A while later, and some of the last things are disconnected like we talked about. I got all of the top bolts around the bell housing out. Of course, the only one that's really difficult to get to, that one down there, was the only one that had a bunch of corrosion on it and was pretty much impossible to get out, or it was very tight. All the other ones, I just cracked loose and get them out with my fingers after a couple turns. This one I had to, do one little turn at a time. It took forever, and my hands got all cramped up from being tight in there, but that worked. And then I ended up removing the air intake here for the cabin to disconnect the loom here. I disconnected the transmission loom as well, just so it's out of the way. But I disconnected the main engine loom from there and removed the plastic bit down there that holds the loom together just to get more space. So I think everything is disconnected now. I really hope so. I have set up a load leveler here. Got this going through the mounts here. There are no lifting hooks in the back of the V8. You can get some special hooks to hook up on the back of here. However, it's not that heavy of an engine, so I hope this is going to be okay. I used these mounts here, and I went through this here, which is not used on this engine. Those threads down there, I'm not sure if they're used on other versions of this engine, but they seemed good and strong, so hopefully that's fine. Otherwise, I will move these over there instead, but it's just so tight down here that let's try that. I've also put a jack down there so I can hold the transmission a little bit, because it does need to move a bit. The whole engine will need to come up a little bit before it can come forward, and I'm really hoping this will work. I have no idea, and if this doesn't work, I'll have to get the car up in the air again, put a couple of the bell housing bolts back in, loosen up the transmission, all of that, and try and get everything out as one piece, if that is possible with my low ceilings. But fingers crossed this actually will work. I've shortened the chain here as much as I can without having to be crooked. My initial idea was to hook this up here, but then everything will be crooked. So I'm hoping I have enough room to set everything up, but we'll find out. And this is also where you find out exactly what you forgot to disconnect. So, let's see. Okay, I'm going to let it down a little bit just to move my strap a tiny bit. So it's more centered if I can. Like that should be good. So far I'm just lifting the whole car. Now the engine is starting to move up. Okay. I'm going to try pretty much just lifting it in the front and seeing if I can get it to come off the engine mounts. I actually do think it is come off the engine mounts there. So I think now it's pretty much just, still stuck on the transmission bell housing. Well, that didn't really go to plan, but that happens sometimes, and I show everything on this channel even when it goes not so well. So I'm not getting the transmission to separate. I've tried everything. It seems that the guide pins, I believe, are stuck. I've counted the bolts. I have all of them out, and yeah, it's just not separating. So on to the next step, which is to remove everything as a unit, the transmission and engine together. However, I can't do that in here. Ceiling's a little bit too low. I think I've done some measurements. I think it's just on the edge of not going to work. So I will have to move this car down into the other storage, and it will take the place of 2 cars, and then 2 cars will have to come up here. That's not really a problem. Getting it down there will be a little bit of a pain, but I'll work that out. Try and get someone to help me out with that. And then we'll try again. I'll put the thing up on jack stands, go underneath, undo the transmission mount, undo the drive shaft and gearbox cable or shifter cable and some electrics down there, and pull all out as a unit. The ceiling is really high in there. It's about 3 times as high in here, so it should not be an issue at all, and it should be out. But that will be in a future video. So this was a good video of how not to remove one of these engines, but at least I tried, and the goal was to be able to do it in here and not have to move the car, but I realized that I can't do it. But that happens sometimes. But I hope this was an enjoyable thing anyways. I will move this car as soon as possible, so the next part of this video should come out really soon, I hope, and you'll have the engine out, and then hopefully pretty quickly get the new one in, sort that out, and get this thing out on the road, and the owner can go out and enjoy it. Anyways, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a lot. Anyways, until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.